Have you personally, or are you aware of anyone else out there living with the likes of POTS, dysautonomia, or chronic fatigue syndrome who purely experiences just one symptom on a chronic basis? I highly doubt you have. I would hazard a guess that although chronic fatigue might be the symptom that's at the top of your list, for example, you're probably familiar with at least a handful of these following symptoms: joint pain, muscle ache, neck tightness, orthostatic intolerance, chest pain, blurry vision, congested sinuses, anxiety, gut pain, temperature sensitivity, headaches, shortness of breath. Do any of those ring a bell? I assume that they most likely do, and the reason for that is because the way the brain operates is a little bit like an orchestra, in the respect that the brain is continuously taking on board information, it's digesting that information, and then it's relaying that information to the rest of the organs in the body to get them to behave in a patterned and coordinated fashion. And then it goes without saying, when it comes to an orchestra, we first have the written piece of music, and then we have a conductor who's following that piece of music. And then with that information, the conductor is then conducting various sections of the orchestra to get them all to play in sync. Whilst this is all well and good, what do you think might happen if somebody decided to tamper with the written music that the conductor was following? What would end up happening is that an absolute racket would end up ensuing, because the conductor wouldn't be able to sufficiently control the various sections of the orchestra. But switching our attention back to the body, and what I want you to envisage is the brain being a little bit like the conductor, whilst all the other organs in the body represent all the separate sections of the orchestra. It's ultimately the brain that directs and determines the activity of all the other organs. This might come in the form of whether blood vessels decide to constrict or dilate, whether the intestine decides to contract or relax, whether the lungs decide to inflate or deflate, whether immune activity is heightened or suppressed, and just a whole host of other variables throughout the body. So ultimately, the organs are just doing what they're told to do. But what do you think might happen if there's a breakdown in communication, either with the way the brain takes on board information, or with the way that it relays this information to the organs throughout the rest of the body? Well, just like the way the orchestra would sound horrific if it was to be given uncoordinated instructions by the conductor, if our brain is continuously firing mismatched signaling into our organs, we're going to end up suffering a similar fate, where our body is going to have to make tons of adaptations, and it's going to leave us, the host, with plenty of undesirable effects. Understanding this exact message should allow you to acknowledge two very key things about the body. The first one being how multiple symptoms in multiple different systems in the body have the capability of manifesting at the same time. And the second thing being that the activity of all of these organs is initiated by commands that are sent down by the brain, which means that if you can change the way your brain takes on board and processes sensory information, then you can impact motor outputs that the brain sends to the organs in the rest of your body. And by doing this, you can improve multiple systems in the body at once, allowing multiple symptoms to improve simultaneously. It is without a shadow of a doubt a very confusing thing to get your head around, but once you see it, it will completely change the trajectory that you take your recovery journey on. And I highly suggest checking out the Unbeatable Blueprint online course to get started. Here you'll learn why your chronic symptoms continue to persist, and I'll provide you with a step-by-step plan of how you can gradually reduce the frequency and severity of these symptoms. Click the link in the description for more details. But to answer the question of how do we improve multiple symptoms in the body at once, firstly, it involves us understanding the connection between these symptoms and the origin of where all of these symptomatic systems actually meet. And then it involves us specifically trying to target that specific area of the brain to improve its function. And we do this with very targeted neurological exercises. If we can optimize the neuronal information that's sent to and processed by our brain at an unconscious and ongoing basis, then by proxy, any symptom that's on that same neuronal pathway further on down should gradually fade away. Just imagine what would happen if you decided to pull the router out of your house. Suddenly, the whole Wi-Fi signal would be wiped, and any device that's reliant on that signal for internet connection would be impacted adversely. Well, a very similar series of events is occurring in the bodies of those with a chronic condition, where there's certain disruptions or breakdowns with the electrical or neuronal information that the brain is receiving and then sending, and it's having a knock-on effect with the organs in the rest of the body, causing them to metaphorically go offline or just not function as they were originally designed to function. So if you do want long-term results when it comes to improving multiple symptoms in the body, what you have to do is to fine-tune the sensory information that your brain is receiving so that in turn it can produce more desirable outputs for the organs throughout the rest of your body. To begin with, this involves seeing a professional who's able to assess you in order to identify any abnormal outputs that your brain is producing, so that they can then in turn prescribe targeted exercises so that you can strengthen the signaling further upstream. Of course, it goes without saying though that the brain is a very complex thing, and different parts of it can control different components within our body, and so it's absolutely essential that you go to see a professional who's qualified in actually being able to assess these neural networks. And in my case, this was achieved when I went to see a trained chiropractic neurologist. And once I was able to obtain this information and then get started on my own tailored rehabilitation plan, I was able to observe multiple symptoms improving in tandem. This included the likes of orthostatic intolerance, a fast heart rate, high blood pressure, digestive issues, a tight neck, blurry vision, shortness of breath, sleep issues, exercise intolerance, temperature sensitivity, and just a whole host of other symptoms. It's kind of cool really that when you actually take this pathway, you start to experience what I would call positive side effects, where you originally had a certain symptom in your mind that you wanted to resolve, but actually what ended up happening was alongside that symptom, a ton of other effects occurred throughout your body, all for the better, and they all contributed to you being able to live a life that you enjoy waking up to.